Hi, this is former Pro Bowl center for the Buffalo Bills, Eric Wood, and you're listening to Nate and the Fellas on the Circling the Wagons podcast on the Buffalo Rumblings Podcast Network. Nobody circles the wagons like the Buffalo Bills. Go Bills.
Where else would you rather be than right here, right now?
Hey, hey, let's go Buffalo. Hey, hey, let's go Buffalo.
The Bills make me wanna shout.
Welcome to the Circling the Wagons podcast, a podcast discussing the Bills all year round with interviews, news, recaps, and insightful fan discussion. Most times. Here's your host and lifelong Bills fan, Nate.
Hey Bills Mafia, welcome to the first preseason episode of Circling the Wagons, a Buffalo Rumblings podcast. I am your host, Nate. Guys, thank you so much for joining us. We have a lot of fun things to talk about this episode. The Bills just had their first preseason game against the Colts in Buffalo, their only preseason game in Buffalo. The Bills ended up winning 23-19. We're going to talk a lot about that game, in particular, some of the things we liked, some of the things we didn't like, some of the plays we liked, some of the plays that, you know, we wish we could have had back, and a lot more. Maybe some Barkley, Kyle Allen discussion, a lot of fun stuff. And then we're going to end the episode with talking about the overages on the Bills' new stadium construction. There's a story from the AP talking about there being over $300 million in estimated overages of the construction costs that the Bills agreed on. And Terry's probably going to have to foot a majority of that. So we're going to talk about that. It'll be a fun way to end this discussion. But first, this episode is brought to you by the Twin Spires Sportsbook at Del Lago. If you're in the Western New York or Central New York area, or Southern New York or Northern New York, wherever you are, in the tri-state area, in the quad state area, whatever, check out the Del Lago Resort and Casino. It is a great time. It is, like we've told you so many times before, we've been to several different casinos, sports books. It's up there, if not one of the best that we've ever been to. And that includes Vegas Strip, Old Vegas, New Jersey, Atlantic City, whatever. We're so lucky to have a place like that so close to us. And it's like I always say, it's the jewel of Waterloo. So I'm joined by my co-hosts, John and Mike.
Wait, and, you always say that?
Yeah, I always say that like a tenth of the time. Once every 10 episodes. You just, I always say it. Well, I am the one that... You never heard that? Oh, you must zone out for those. Or maybe I wait for the ones that you can't make, and I'm just like, I just use it all the time. But yeah, Jewel of Waterloo. Do you like that one?
I like that, yeah.
Thanks.
You're claiming inventing it?
We'll see. We'll see. I'm joined, as you heard before, by my co-hosts Mike and John. John, how you doing, man? First preseason game.
Doing great. It's always weird football back for the first preseason game and like getting back into it. You see like the same articles from the same people. You got sales. Arrow up, arrow down, and like everything's coming back. So I love it. They won. How about that?
They've won 11 of the past 12 preseason games. 11
just going to ask
12.
that because it feels like they've won a lot of preseason games in recent history. Let me tell you, McDermott calling the plays for the first time in Buffalo here. It was not a vanilla defense in the first preseason game. He was dialing up blitzes. It was definitely fun to watch.
Yeah. I'm excited to see. It's funny. You hear a lot of the players when they talk about McDermott running the defense. They're always like, I love it. Like I guess the company line, if he was just to say something that was very vanilla, would be like, yeah, Coach McDermott, has a great mind for this, and I'm looking forward to it. But they're just like, this is great. Like, we're so excited. It's almost like they asked Damar Hamlin that after the game, and it's almost like I get the feeling that they're not only are they saying a lot about McDermott, but it sounds like they're also speaking even louder about, without saying a thing, about Frazier. Like, I feel like that's what they're saying, like when they're saying they're so excited and they love what McDermott's doing, they're also basically saying, I wasn't a fan of what we were doing before. I get it, but it wasn't the best we could have done. That's kind of the feeling I get. So Mike, welcome into the podcast. First preseason game out of the way. How are you doing? You're welcome. So first impressions of the games in general. John, I think you started off. really well with the point on defense. How about on offense? So this is something that, at first sight, I was lucky I was at the game, but I didn't catch all of it because it was a kids' day game and I was with my kids and wife. And so there's a lot of things going on and, experiences and getting food and going back, to finding your seats, all that fun stuff. So I missed some of it. I did rewatch the highlights and some of the other, the replay. And it was just the defense was interesting, but the Kyle Allen versus Matt Barkley discussion needs to be had because and I think it's exemplified, or it's even amplified by the fact that there have been a lot of stories written in the last couple of weeks, like the Bills, Kyle Allen is struggling. The Bills' backup quarterback situation might not be that good. I mean, Joe Biscaglia had an article written about it in The Athletic, and if he writing an article that's specifically dedicated to that topic, that's a big deal. And then, so you're like, okay, well, that's interesting. We'll see how it goes. And then the fact that Kyle Allen did have some struggles, and it's not even that big of a deal because it's like, well, he's got a backup offensive line, blah, blah, blah. Or I'm sorry, he doesn't have a backup offensive line, but he's playing against first stringers on defense. There's a lot of things to take into account. But then when Matt Barkley comes on the field and his stat line was 14 of 15 for 172 yards, 2 touchdowns, 0 interceptions, you look at that and you're like, hey, maybe that's pretty good. He looked good in that offense. I guess my point is looking back now that it's, been a day since the game has happened, I didn't think Kyle Allen had that bad of a game, but I thought Matt Barkley had a really good game about that. Is that kind of what you noticed when you watched the game?
Yeah. I mean, there definitely wasn't a lot of things going in Kyle Allen's favor. There was at least a couple of drop balls, especially one that killed a long drive. There was the pick six that bounced off the receiver. Bates had a high snap, the one play. Butker whiffed on a block and he got sacked. It wasn't good overall. So I wouldn't be all over Allen just yet necessarily. But sure, it's a conversation. I mean, Barkley looked good, but he's looked good in the past and still ended up third string too. So it's not, it's not a bad problem to have either, that there's a competition there, right? So
no, exactly. I mean, it's so funny. Matt Barkley has had an interesting career in Buffalo because he's one of those guys that when he has had his opportunities, he has shown up pretty well for the most part. So he was with the Bills in 2018. Let's see. I'm looking for the game that he had.
There was one game against Miami where he came in and Miami needed to win the game to make the playoffs, and the Bills were just coasting at that point, and he dismantled them pretty good.
Which game was that, John?
Miami game. The
Miami game. Is that what you said? Sorry, I'm trying to.
I can't remember the year.
This is Pro Football Reference. Pro Football Reference is a great site if you don't mind 25 different ads coming up every time you click on something, and then waiting for every ad to fully load before you're trying to I'm trying to look at his game splits, right? And they're just taking a while to come up.
Yeah, I mean, while you're looking, they said on the telecast that Kyle Allen's got the bigger arm, and Matt Barkley doesn't have the arm, but he's willing to take more risks and throw it downfield more, which is good and bad, right? That's good, but you'll the turnover frequency will probably increase with that.
What would you rather have as your backup quarterback between those two options, not knowing that they're Matt Barkley or Kyle Allen, not knowing that one person is way ahead of the other person or not? I mean, who would you rather have it as your backup? I mean, the two options, you have a guy with maybe a better arm, but is not as prone to throw the ball into areas where he shouldn't. Whereas you have the other guy who's doesn't have as good of an arm, but he'll throw it. He'll find a guy and he'll throw it to a guy, whether it's good or bad. He'll at least make the throw. I feel like that was one of the things that was very frustrating about players like Tyrod Taylor is he wouldn't even bother throwing the ball. It's just throw it. Try to make a play, that. And
would you rather have Fitz?
I don't know. I guess
Fitz or
Mike,
Tyrod?
John, let me know what you think. To me, as my backup, Fitz for sure. But okay. So here's the thing. It depends on if the Bills are going to be without Josh Allen for like a game or two or like an entire season. Because if it's an entire season, like balls to the wall, do whatever you got to do, right? Like either give me an A or give me an F. I want you to like like win the Super Bowl or to like go 4-12 or 4-13 or whatever. Like I only want one of those two things. But at least with a guy like Fitz, if you needed to, I'm sure he could dial back and become a game manager, right? Whereas the other option, like you're not all of a sudden going to make a guy start throwing the ball that he never normally throws, right? I think I'd rather take the Matt Barkley out of the two. Just his proclivity to throw the ball and want to make plays.
You can't make proclivity a non-sexual word. Try as you might.
His proclivity to throw the ball. That's a thing. Is if I go to Merriam-Webster dictionary, proclivity, the first thing isn't going to be it's a sports example in a sentence, I don't think.
But it's like
his proclivity
words that have entered the vernacular as something completely different. Like 100 years ago, you would say like, oh, he was so like ejaculate meant surprised. Like, oh, it was a surprise party. They all ejaculated. Whereas now you don't do that. Same holds true with proclivity.
Did you just make that up?
I was yeah, I think
that's what I mean.
I was truly ejaculated at the game that Matt Barkley had. It was quite ejaculating.
No, I think you're using
did I
it in
use
the current
that wrong?
context.
Oh, no. Like it was surprising. Isn't that all that means?
It's like a surprised utterance.
Oh, I uttered.
It'd be like, oh my gosh, he ejaculated.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah, you don't see that in many books being written today either.
No.
I'm reading through the Harry Potter series. I have not read the ejaculated one once.
Are you really reading it or are you listening to it?
My 7-year-old's reading it to me. It's part of it. No, I'm just kidding. I'm reading it to him. But like it's totally a selfish endeavor because I've never read the books. I'm like, oh, here's a good excuse. We get to read the nighttime book stories, and I get to
killing two birds.
Yeah. But yeah, that's a good. So
it's another phrase that needs updating.
How many birds have been murdered in the past just to like that phrase? There's so many different ways to skin a cat, right? Like, geez, how many cats were being skinned?
Brutal.
Jeez.
Yeah.
It's just I even think about this because I have a dog. I have a pit bull, and I think like I don't even have a dog in the fight, and like I know it's not meant that way, but like there's a lot of dogs like dog fighting. I'm not a big fan of, So there's
all these sayings need updating. It should be like helping two strangers, not killing two birds.
That's just as good as helping two strangers. Helping two hobos. It's just, yeah, there needs to be a lot of updates. All right, maybe we'll come up with something. So back to Barkley. Barkley. Who would you rather have, Mike? Who would you rather have? The
Barkley.
Fitzy sort of. Okay. All right. So Kyle Allen. So Matt Barkley did look much better than Kyle
You want
Allen.
the guy who's got the locker room, who's familiar with the system, who's been there since 2018, minus a year. No question.
What's funny, so get this. So when they asked Matt Barkley, because Matt Barkley was in the press conference after the game, they asked Matt Barkley what he thought of Kyle Allen. And they said, like, Kyle's really, he's still picking up the playbook. And, like, I don't know about you guys. I don't know if I want to hear that about my backup quarterback. Like, it's nice that he has all these, tremendous talents as far as, throwing the ball or whatever, reading defenses. But if the time comes and we're, 3 weeks away from live bullets and my backup quarterback isn't really fully engulfed into the playbook, like that's not a good sign. If you know that and then what you saw, would you rather have Matt Barkley, who knows the entire playbook because he's been there for 2 years under Dorsey and he looked okay with the backups? Like, why wouldn't you want Barkley? And what's even better is that like after the game, they asked Sean McDermott at the press conference, like point blank, is this a competition at backup quarterback? Because we didn't think it was. Like I didn't think. I was like, oh, Matt Barkley's like that, rah guy in the locker room. He's going to be inactive every single game day, right? Like, but Sean McDermott replied, yes, just one word. Is it QB? Is there competition for backup quarterback? Yes.
That's the perfect answer because
he made it very obvious that it is not over. It is not Kyle Allen's job.
Is up for competition. That's his standard answer for any position across the whole roster. So, like, of course he's going to say yes. And it is true. I'm not saying that it's not true just because he said yes. It's true. Like, it is a competition. I want to see what happens next week, personally.
But he didn't say it, so it would. Me too. But I mean, Kyle Allen could get back in our good graces with another good game, right? Because that's what happened last year with Case Keenum. Like, everyone was like, "What is Case Keenum doing? Why is he?" And then all of a sudden, he just lit it up finally within the second or third preseason game, right? So I'm not too worried. But it's definitely notable, man. It's probably the biggest storyline coming out of that game.
Probably, which is also a good thing, right? Because they have a good team.
Yeah, exactly. So let's move on to some of the other topics. Damar Hamlin, obviously a big story with that. He is first actual game action. It feels like everything's kind of like a baby step or a step in the right direction for him as he, just had his first padded practice, just a week or two ago. And now it's his first game action since the incident. And not only that, like, he looked good. So, like, that was really cool. He was in his press conference after talking about everything, it was really cool. It's really cool to hear him in general. He's one of those guys that, you really root for because he just seems like just a genuinely good person. Like, he's always been that way. Now he just has that platform where everyone wants to hear him. I mean, if you think about it, besides Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs, Damar Hamlin is probably the most popular guy on the Bills roster. Maybe Von Miller also. But, like, unlike, Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs, and Von Miller, like, Damar Hamlin transcends, like, football in general. Like, people that have no idea who's on the Buffalo Bills know who Damar Hamlin is because of what happened. Like, he's kind of like a celebrity. So it's kind of cool that he could have easily, been like, this isn't for me, like, and just done his press tours, just done, his motivational speaking or whatever, like raising awareness, and all those things would have been great. All those things would have been respected and whatnot. But the fact that he's still, doing what he's doing, and he's playing at a level which makes you think that there's no way that they can cut him when the 53-man roster, cut downs happen, is because, like, not only that, he's just playing that well. Like, you can't, he's trying to make it undeniable that the Bills can stop him. And they asked Matt Barkley about it. They're like, what was it like to see Damar out there? He's like, well, it wasn't a big deal for us because we see him out there every day. Like, there's not been a time when he wasn't out there practicing with us. So for us, it's per usual. I mean, it's great to see it, but we're used to this. Like, this is just who Damar is. So that was kind of cool too. So cool. All right. So let's see. So this is interesting. I thought you try to read between the lines of some of the things that happened during the game. And it's funny. I was on Fernando Schmutz podcast, leading the charge on the Buffalo Rumblings podcast network. He asked me to come on Friday afternoon. We were talking. He's like, what are you looking for at the game when you're going to be there? And I was like, honestly, like, they're not going to show a whole lot, of coverage and scheme. Not that I would definitely know it, like, live anyway, like, be able to point that out or know what they're doing. Like, John, you mentioned the coverages. Like, I couldn't tell that live. Like, I wasn't like, oh, this is definitely what they're doing. Like, that's cool that you noticed that. Like, I didn't notice that live. So, I mentioned to him plays that stick out, players that stick out, players that I hadn't thought about necessarily that just kind of seemed to shine in the game or struggle or vice versa. And one of the things was, Dane Jackson. I thought Dane Jackson, he only played like 5 snaps, but in one of those 5 snaps, he had an interception, like from the Colts starting quarterback, or at least the Colts rookie quarterback right now. And I thought that looked good. And then if you noticed, after that series, he didn't play the game anymore. And who played every single snap after that for the most part, at least like in his stead, were both Kaiir Elam and Christian Benford. So to me, that just, I know Dane Jackson has been getting first team reps all throughout camp. They've been sprinkling in Kaiir Elam and Christian Benford and taking, switches. But to me, it's clear as day right now that Dane Jackson seems like he's in lock for the number 2 cornerback position outside of Tre'Davious White. And the fact that he was starting, the fact that he had that big play and then they took him out, because if he was on the field with Christian or Kaiir Elam to start the game, you'd be like, well, I mean, who's the better one? You don't know. But then when you see the fact that he comes off the field and those two are staying on, like, that doesn't mean that it means that they're probably most likely not going to be starting.
Yeah. I mean, there's still time, but then you had Elam had the pass interference. It's, but good problem to have again, right? Like, corner, they have good depth now. Safety, they have really good depth. Like, the defensive line has really good depth. I mean, Wide receiver, apparently they have really good depth at too.
Yeah. This is exactly that is really. So before I give another note, Mike, John, is there one that you want to give, like something that you notice about the game in general, maybe about a player or anything like that?
I think so. Like I mentioned earlier, like
Good or bad?
McDermott and like calling blitzes and mixing it up. It seemed like Dorsey probably didn't have the same luxury because Allen's not playing, Diggs isn't playing, Kincaid only ran one passing route. So like. Now I don't know how much they would want to show anyway on offense, but I don't think he was afforded the same luxury to kind of do that on offense.
Yeah, that makes sense. So even vanilla offensively, like I still think they didn't look bad. I thought the offense looked pretty good, all things considered. But you're right. There's things that they can show in defense that they might show all season, so it's not a big deal. I thought Latavius Murray had a pretty good game, all things considered. I know Damien Harris right now is injured, and we obviously lost Nyheim Hines for the season with the jet ski incident. So I like Latavius Murray, and he'd always been kind of like an afterthought to me. And then when we had Sean Murphy on from Buffalo Rumblings, and he's doing his 90 players in 90 days write up, which ends up being like 110 players at the end because some guys that he writes about get cut, and then they add new players, so he has to write more about them. I said, who are you writing about? Who have you written about so far that you're actually kind of interested in that nobody's talking about? And he's like, Latavius Murray. Because he was writing about him. He's like, the guy had like 11 carries for 114 yards his last game this last season with the Broncos in Denver against the Chargers. Like he's 6'3", 233 pounds. So like he's only like 10 or 12 pounds less than Derrick Henry and the same height. Of course, he's 32 years old right now, so that's not ideal. But like he doesn't look bad. Like he's not the James Cook. I mean, I thought James Cook had a good game. Like I love the fact that when James Cook touches the ball, he could potentially go all the way. I mean, he could be, stopped at the line, of course, too. But like he could run around the edge and actually like you got to catch him. You got to catch him down the sidelines. Latavius Murray doesn't have that, but he's got size. And I think should Damien Harris miss time because of injuries, like right now he's injured. And what we always say, what is it? Your best ability is your availability, right? Like Damien Harris doesn't have that right now. So, and good for Latavius Murray for taking advantage of it. Cause I thought he looked pretty good.
I was writing off Murray as, the McDermott token old running back that he likes to have on the roster. But, for a 33-year-old, he showed some bursts, let me tell you. Especially on, like, at least on one of the receptions he had, like, in turning it upfield, and he had a nice run. Like, yeah, I changed my tune on him.
Yeah, and in your defense, like, McDermott does love those guys. He does love, keeping on, holding on to, like, the Mike Tolberts of the world a little bit longer than they should be. He likes holding on to the Frank Gores, like just having that and it used to be like those guys are going to be their starters. So like Damien Harris, he has 449 attempts, and how many receptions does he? He doesn't have any so he has 500 touches. I wonder how much Latavius Murray does, because he doesn't have as many touches as like a lot of these guys that are in their 30s, right? So he has 1,400 touches. 1,400 carries, and he has 222 receptions.
That's probably what it is. He doesn't have as many touches as
but it's not
running backs who are in their 30s.
No.
So he's still able to, yeah.
Exactly. He had, how many attempts did he have last season? 170 rushes, which isn't bad. It's not terrible. Like, that's a decent amount of rushes, but it's not that many. And he had 27 receptions. His yards per attempt last year with Denver was 4.4 yards per attempt.
Yeah.
It's not bad. So, like, he kind of shows a little bit more. So, Latavius Murray, maybe he doesn't have the youth that Damien Harris does, but he does have the size that Damien Harris doesn't have. And he also has the ability to be a receiving back, which wasn't a big, focal point for Damien Harris. Usually Belichick loves having like one guy who just catches the ball, right? Like a James White type running back. So yeah, I'm excited. Good for him, man. Are there any other players that jumped out to you, like good or bad, that you noticed?
Actually,
John?
Just to backtrack one more. So let's say Cook, Harris, Murray, and Gilliam all make the roster, right? Do you think any other running backs make the roster, like thinking about special teams and that sort of thing? Or do you think that would be covered elsewhere potentially.
It feels like it's being covered elsewhere, to be honest. If you think about like guys that are gunners, like Justin Shorter sounds like he could be another guy that, by the way, we're talking about disappointments. Like, I'm not going to go wall of shame on him, but I was kind of hoping Justin Shorter would have gotten one of like the 30 targets, one of the 30 targets, and he didn't get any targets. So that was kind of a disappointment, but Justin Shorter should figure in for special teams. So I feel like he's a lock to make the roster. Plus, who doesn't love the cost control rookie contracts?
Yeah, Shorter.
These guys. But no, I can't see any of these.
I was looking forward to, because he's being hyped up, right? Big receiver.
Yeah.
But no, I don't think I even noticed him.
Yeah, 6'4", 220 pounds or something.
But meanwhile,
like that.
they threw it to at least 10 different guys.
Just not.
Least,
so
right?
Just
not him.
Yeah. Yes, they did. That's the thing. They how many? Hold on, I'll tell you how many receivers had a target. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. 13 running backs and receivers had targets. So they were spreading the ball around. That's even more disappointing that Shorter didn't even get one of those,
No tight ends.
But to your point, oh no, I'm sorry.
I wasn't. No, was there a tight end target? Oh yeah, Sternberger.
Sternberger.
And then
Jay Sternberger. Yeah, the guy who fumbled.
But some of those other guys who I'd never heard of before, Aitman and Patman, they did pretty good.
Dude, so we do a podcast every week about the Buffalo Bills, and like I'm reading constantly, like we're keeping track of training camp. No one's ever mentioned Tyrell Shavers. Like not once have I heard his name come up. Who else? You're saying Aitman? Who is Aitman?
Well, Shavers, he got that touchdown, but he didn't really have that great of a game. He had 2 or 3 drops before that touchdown.
No, he did have that drop that led to the pick 6, right?
That one, yeah. So,
well, you know what? So we're gonna.
But that wasn't even that.
So,
that play was kind of hard to see, like what actually happened. But like he had 2 other drops that were really bad.
Oh, really? San Diego State, 6'4", 211 pounds. So, undrafted rookie Tyrell Shavers. Man, they like the size of that guy, though. Jeez. But you know what I liked?
Johnson, he's another one.
This is kind of like Keyshawn Johnson.
It's weird. It's weird to say Keyshawn Johnson.
He did. He looked good. But it's Key as in Keesean, not Meshawn Johnson like for the Jets and the Bucks. Is Keyshawn? Yeah, Keyshawn is this is his 3rd year in the NFL. Dude, so you're saying about Tyrell Shavers, like, do credit to the coaching staff for the Buffalo Bills, because they could have easily sat him down after that play if they figured it was his fault for knocking up the ball for a pick 6, but they didn't give up on him. They kept going. So like they could have easily been like, you're done. And then just like his career could have been over after that play if they didn't start him and nobody else gave him a shot, but they kept him in there. He ended up getting a touchdown, which was cool to see. Shavers had, guess who is the leading receiver for the Buffalo Bills? If you had to guess,
receptions or yards,
unless you already know. Yards. You can give me both.
Okay.
Actually, they are both. The 2 leaders have the same amount of yards, but they have the same amount of receptions too. And everyone else just tied in receptions. No one has more than them.
Man, they spread the ball around a lot. I don't know.
So the first one you would think of, he was just signed recently, veteran guy, slot receiver.
Isabella?
His first name begins with an A. Yes, is Andy Isabella. Yep. 3 targets, 3 receptions, 42 yards. I thought he looked pretty good.
He definitely looks fast.
He seemed to get some separation.
He didn't drop anything, especially in returns, which is important.
He does. But go ahead.
Yeah.
Dude, that's 90% of it. That's 90% of it. He's just
look super amazing on the returns, but he did look fast, and he did not drop the ball, which they've had problems with before. So.
Yeah, so like I agree. Like he was nothing spectacular at all in the return game, but I thought in slot he looked pretty good. Like he looked okay. He had one of those like really good passes from Kyle Allen. So like I mean it looked pretty good. So I like him. I don't think he makes the roster. I think he probably makes the practice squad or something like that. But he might be the first guy that becomes activated off the practice squad if someone gets injured, right? Like a Khalil Shakir or something like that. Which I thought Khalil Shakir. What'd you think of Khalil Shakir, John? Before we talk about Marcus Aitman and Jordan Mims or whoever else. What do you think of
Well,
Khalil Shakir? 4 targets, 2 receptions,
that
25 yards.
really bad drop. But prior to that, he had 2 spectacular catches. So it's like, I guess a little inconsistent. But like,
what do you do with that?
Like
right?
people are dogging on him. Like, well, I wouldn't like put him in my negative column. I'd probably keep him in my neutral column right now. But like, I don't know.
So he's had that issue. Like even I think he was only active or at least starting one game last year, and I think it was against the Steelers. And he had one big drop in that game, I remember specifically. I've been watching him, and like drops were an issue in college for Khalil Shakir. Like I know he had some really great highlight level catches, and he did one-arm catches, stuff like that. But he struggled in college with catches. Like he had a really bad catch rate from PFF and stuff like that. So that's not new for him.
Sounds like Gabe Davis.
So here's what you have to deal with is you remember. Sounds like Gabe Davis / Dawson Knox's first 3 seasons. Like, yeah. So you just have to be okay with that as a Bills fan, or just understand that that's something you get with Khalil Shakir. For the people that are banging on Khalil Shakir, on that drum, which I totally get, I like him a lot. You just have to know that that's also a real thing. Like he's not a perfect wide receiver. He does have drops.
And then I don't know if Hardy did anything. I didn't notice him. Sherfield, he had an illegal shift and he had trouble getting separation on a 3rd and short play is what I wrote down. But I didn't notice Hardy at all that I can see here.
Yeah, Hardy and Sherfield only had 1 target each. No receptions.
So that's disappointing. They're new free agents.
You know who didn't look bad is Jordan Mims, the running back. Like I thought he looked okay, specifically on that one screen pass, which by the way, I forgot that, screen passes were a thing that the Bills could potentially even try on offense, or a screen pass, it was like a bubble screen or whatever, or a throw out to the flat. That's something the Bills apparently have been either practicing or they have the intention of potentially doing in the future. A draw play. I believe I saw a draw play. That was cool to see. I don't see that often with the Buffalo Bills. That's something they could really take advantage of, especially with 2 tight end sets. You think that they're, if you have the matchup you want and they have a, defensive back covering Dalton Kincaid and he runs out, then just, stay back, hand the ball off to James Cook and let him run for 10, 12 yards.
I thought all the running backs looked good for the Bills. The yards per carry for all of them weren't great, but in their own way, they show different things. Darrington Evans had a good special teams play. They all had different things that looked good, I thought.
Was his a receiving? Was it a return or was it a tackle that you saw?
I can't read my handwriting. I thought it was a return, kickoff return, but I can't tell. That's why I was generic when I said it before.
Yes, it was a kickoff return. It was a 42-yard kickoff return from Darrington Evans. great.
I was like, Darrington Evans, great.
Hardy had one. Yeah, Darrington Evans. So maybe he does get a possible look at return, but I think they have that covered between Shakir and Deontay Hardy. I think Hardy's going to be the guy, at least right now, who's starting for the receiving role for punt returns and kick returns, and I think it'll be Khalil Shakir after that. So I don't think they keep Darrington Evans just for kickoff returns, but especially with the new rule into effect, there's going to be so many less.
And what's
the
new rule again?
All right, let's do some. The new rule is that you can literally fair catch the kickoff wherever you want to, and it's going to be put at the 25-yard line. So before it had
you fair catch it at a 2, it goes to the 25 still. Interesting.
Yeah. Yep. Interesting. Yep. They want to eliminate that. So that's what the Bills had a very low rate of touchbacks because they wanted to force those guys to return it at the 2-yard line and then tackle them at the 18, right? Because you're already given, that's an advantage. Not like Tyler Bass can't kick it out of the end zone. He can. It's just a matter of that's what that was. So now they lose that advantage.
I don't know why it should just be the 20 and I know they moved the kickoffs 5 yards closer to at one point to prevent returns. They did all kinds of stuff over the years, and I don't know. I, I don't know. I'm gonna stop before I go my old man soapbox.
Why don't they give them all trophies? John's like, geez, just put them in. What do all the old guys say? Why don't they just put them in skirts or tutus or something like that?
Stay off my lawn.
Such an old guy thing to say. But yeah, no, I get what you're saying. That is stay off my lawn. Yeah. No, I get what you're saying, but at the same time, it's like if they see that as a major cause of injuries and concussions, like I get it. Like so I'm not happy about it, but what are you going to do, right? So at least it's not a ridiculous, at least I'm not like, I can't see why they would ever do that. So anyway, let's go into, so in our normal podcast. So for those of you that are listening for the first time, we do a recap show after every game, the regular season, postseason, where we do our Sweet Sassy Molassy plays of the game, our Wall of Famers and Wall of Shamers. We do stats of the game. Let me do stats of the game real quick, just to give folks an idea of. I won't even go over the Colts portion of it because it doesn't matter. It matters even less in the preseason. But Matt Barkley, like I mentioned before, 14 of 15, 172 yards, 2 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. Kyle Allen, 8 of 15, 122 yards, 0 touchdowns, 1 interception. Leading rusher for the Buffalo Bills was Jordan Mims. I mentioned 7 attempts for 23 yards. James Cook had that 1 touchdown I mentioned earlier. He was 4 carries for 20 yards, so he looked pretty good. Leading receivers, we mentioned Andy Isabella, 3 receptions on 3 targets for 42 yards. And then Keyshawn Johnson, the next leading receiver, 3 receptions on 3 targets for 42 yards. We're talking about touchdowns. So we mentioned Marcel Aitman. He was the next leading receiver, 2 receptions on 2 targets for 41 yards. So pretty good stat line from him. The 6'4", 216-pound wide receiver, 3 years in the league. Tyrell Shavers. Oh, I mentioned him too. 6'4", undrafted free agent out of San Diego State. And then we have Desmond Patman, 6'4", 225-pound guy out of Washington State. This is his 3rd season. We may never talk about these guys ever again, so that's why I'm bringing it up. And then we have Jordan Mims, the rookie undrafted running back out of Fresno State. Jordan Mims had 2 receptions on 2 targets for 30 yards. Patman had the touchdown. Shavers had a touchdown. So those were the big major stats of the game. Let me do defense real quick. Dorian Williams led the team with 6 tackles. Zane Anderson was next. I thought Zane Anderson, by the way, guys that just I just noticed while watching, Zane Anderson is one of those guys as backup safety. I'm not saying he makes a team, but he didn't look half bad. Boogie Basham had three tackles, 1 sack. Tim Settle had a tackle and a sack, and Dane Jackson had the interception we mentioned. There was 2 turnovers that the Buffalo Bills had, and then only 1 turnover by the Colts. So that was our stats of the game. So let's do a Sweet Sassy Molassy play of the game. John, I'll start with you. What was your Sweet Sassy Molassy play of the game?
For me, Nate, I would have to say that the 2-point conversion stop by linebacker Travin Howard, I thought that was a huge stop. Great tackle. Just good all-around play. And I wrote down my notes in all capital letters, huge stop, so I'm going to go with that one.
Well, if the notes say huge stop, it's a huge stop in capital letters. John, you don't do many notes in capital letters, so if it's there, it's there. I want to say, so John, you're a resident podcast historian. That reminded me of the Mike Stratton hit almost 60 years ago, which is crazy that it's almost 60 years ago, dude, against, someone Lincoln from the Chargers in the 1964 AFL championship game. I posted it on social media, so if you're not following us, please do. At CTW Pod, Circling the Wagons podcast, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. I posted it everywhere. It just reminded me of that shot that Stratton had. Now, it wasn't as devastating as that one. I mean, if I remember correctly, Stratton broke 3 of Lincoln's ribs, and he was just laid out in the field. Back when guys didn't wear skirts to play football, or back when, not everyone got a trophy for just showing up to the game. What'd you think about that? Did you think about that at all? Or even now that I mention it, it makes you think about that play a little bit?
No, but uh, now,
No, not at all.
no,
That's a
I mean,
stupid thing
no,
you just said,
that's
Nate.
cool that made you think of that because that was a really cool play, and it should be something that people remember, like because it was a really cool play in history. Yeah.
I love that play. I love that you mentioned Travin Howard's play. That was one of my favorite plays too, for sure. That was a good one. Let's see, Mike. Mike, what do you have as your sweet sassy molassy play of the game?
I have to go with Damar Hamlin, Nate. The fourth down stop. I mean, he had 3 solo tackles, but the key one was on fourth down. And it was just great seeing him out there.
Yeah, for sure. It was. I agree. It was good to see. Like I mentioned, not only did he play today and get his first action, he looked pretty good in it. So I think he's a lock, at least right now, to make the roster as a fourth safety. I didn't see what he did special teams wise specifically. I don't know if he took any snaps there. I believe he did. But yeah, it was good to see that. He's a really inspiring guy. If you ever listen to his post-game press conferences, like there's a lot you get out of that. You don't get out of every. You know what's funny too is he mentioned, and they showed it on social media, the Buffalo Bills, like when Damar Hamlin got on the field, like Stephon Diggs was one of the first guys to hug him when he was actually on the field, like a big hug and whatever. And Damar Hamlin retweeted that video and said, number 14 was one of my brothers, one of the first people to stay with me and see me. And I don't know if you guys remember that. The night of the Damar Hamlin thing in Cincinnati, like Stephon Diggs was one of the players that went to go visit him that night in the hospital, like made his way over there to see him. So it just made me think of like, the fact that Damar's mentioning this, Stephon Diggs like truly did that. I remember seeing him like that night, staying up late and seeing him. It's just like, it just goes to show you that whole narrative of him being a cancer in the locker room or being a terrible teammate. Like I don't think there's many people like that would go to that end to make sure that, their friend or their teammate was okay. So I liked hearing that story again. And I probably won't talk about Damar Hamlin for a little bit. But by the way, speaking of Damar Hamlin, dude, his clone looks really good, by the way. I love that people say that because, like, remember there was a thing, there was a conspiracy theory was that he actually died that night because he got vaccinated and the NFL put a clone in for him and the guy looks just like him and he's like playing so good that he's going to make an NFL roster. Like you could find a guy who looked exactly like Damar Hamlin, had the same height, the same weight, as muscular, as strong as him. He might look absolutely awful on a football field when it came down to it. Like he would have nowhere. He doesn't have the like 15, 20 years of experience of like Damar Hamlin, like backpedaling against, wide receivers or like wrapping up and tackling. And I love that one. So John, you actually had my Travin Howard, Sweet Sassy Molassie play of the game. Let's go into Wall of Famers and Wall of Shamers. And I'm going to put Matt Barkley on my Wall of Fame. Dude, you got to respect it. He went in knowing he was the third string quarterback last year and this year, but he's not giving up. Like he's showing everything that he can. And I'm all here for it, man. Like if that means that he's definitely an option to become the backup quarterback, like that's cool. Like that's good for him. Like you respect it. He's easily one of the most likable backup quarterbacks the Bills have had in a long time. So he's on my Wall of Fame. John, who's on your Wall of Fame?
Am I allowed to do honorable mentions?
Absolutely. Yes. Why was Barkley going to be your Wall of Fame?
So you already said it.
Okay. Yeah. Get some honorable mentions. Get some honorable.
Sam Martin
mentions.
Had
buddy.
a really good game punting. But I also wanted to comment on the defensive line depth. More specifically, Basham and Settle, but like later in the game, some of the guys further down the depth chart, I thought did well. And then the receiver depth too, like Aitman, Patman, Johnson, Isabella, they all had pretty good games, I thought.
Yeah, absolutely. Mike, do you have a Wall of Famer? I didn't know if you had one for this.
Just Damar Hamlin. Well, I got to go Barkley. Really, he balled out.
Yeah. I like Damar Hamlin as being one, right? Like that's a good one too. That's an honorable mention to Damar for that one. I'm going to give an honorable mention to Latavius Murray, right? Just as one of those guys that just, I mean, he's sticking around, man. Like you got to respect it. Just like the Matt Barkley, like he's not going to give up that job. He wants it, and he's proving it on the field that like he's showing up. I forgot. This was actually going to be my Sweet Sassy Molassie play of the game. Was the Dane Jackson interception? That was one of my honorable mentions there. So Latavius Murray, honorable mention there. Andy Isabella, honorable mention. Like he looked pretty good so far. Not so much returning. Like he looked okay there. Like John said, though, he did like 90% of it, like just catching the ball. Like that's huge. Good job at Andy Isabella for not dropping it. Speaking of Isaiah McKenzie, playing against him, and the fact that the Bills actually ran a screenplay and some draw plays, like that's another honorable mention for me. I don't have any wall of shamers. I don't think you guys probably do either. Is there anything or anyone or anything you want to put on your wall of shame?
Yeah, I got a couple things. I mean, it's preseason after all, so there's going to be stuff.
The fact that you could just have a fair catch, that's BS. Should get it to 25.
Well, and it should be at the 20, first of all. Anyway, let's forget that. Shavers is definitely high on my list. I think he did have a couple of nice catches, including the touchdown, but he was inconsistent. He had also had a couple of bad drops, and then the deflection, I think, for the pick six was off of him. Not exactly sure whose fault that one was. Rousseau missed Richardson on a sack in the backfield, and then he also had a neutral zone penalty. And then I think I mentioned earlier, Sherfield had an illegal shift and couldn't get separation on a 3rd and short play that was thrown to him. But if my number one is probably just the penalties, 8 for 59, 8 penalties is a lot. So I'm going to go with that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, those are all good. I mean, McDermott mentioned them at his press conference. The penalties he didn't like, he didn't note that was one of the big weaknesses he saw in the game. So, yeah, good one. All good. John, who's your favorite backup wide receiver of this game? Andy. I mean, let's not say Andy Isabella because we've heard of him. Let's do Keyshawn Johnson. Let's do Marcel Aitman. I know it's not Tyrell Shavers. You just gave him the wall of shame, so I don't think he's going to do it. And then we'll do Desmond Patton. Those 3 guys. Was there one that you liked more than the other?
That's really hard. That's what she said. Sounds
like it's going to take you a long time.
Yeah, like Aitman and Patton. Patton kind of stood out to me.
Patman, like Pac-Man.
Yeah,
Patman.
Yeah, Aitman and Patman, I think, stood out to me a little bit more so. But I mean, like overall, like how many are any of these guys going to make the roster? I mean, Johnson, it's going to be tough, right?
They're probably not. Well, so oh yeah, none of them are making it. But like as far as your favorite, is there a Cinderella story on? Because I love those. I love the guys that are underdogs that just show up. Like even I'd argue that Matt Barkley was that in this game. Like this is a guy who was a 3rd stringer. He was almost a in stone 3rd stringer, and he showed up. He looked great. I think that we as fans, we love those stories of those guys overcoming it. Those guys maybe they don't hear about in practice. Maybe they don't even have great practices, but when the bullets are live, they show up. So Matt Barkley was one of those guys for me. I'm just trying to think of somebody else that came all those wide receivers because they all had about the same amount of targets and catches. Like it's hard to differentiate.
5
them.
Receivers. They had
I think
2 or 3
almost
receptions for 35 to 42 yards each. They're all the same.
Yeah, it's hard to differentiate them.
and even the eye test because Barkley's
I might even say Jordan Mims. I thought Jordan Mims had a good game.
Mims is a good one too. Yeah. Well, he's a running back, right? You were asking receiver.
Well, okay. So we don't have besides Barkley, we don't have yeah, he's a running back. I was just trying to think in general after mentioning the wide receivers, and it was hard to pick out one. I'm like, well, maybe there's a running back that we liked that was a little bit off the radar. We kind of mentioned Latavius Murray, but I think Murray makes the team. It's just one of those guys that like the Christian Wades of the world. That there hasn't really been one like that this year yet. So I know it's because the team is really stacked and they have really good depth. I'm just, you know what I mean? Is there one that sticks out to you?
It's early, I think. I think in general, overall, it was a good game. I think there was good things on both sides of the ball and special teams too.
Definitely.
That I liked all around. So I'm feeling good.
Yeah, wall of shame is me for sometimes I feel for caring about whether the Bills win a preseason game. I'm like, why do I even care? But then I like get happy when they do. I don't know why. I don't know if it's just a Pavlovian response of all these years, like winning good, losing bad, except even when it doesn't matter whatsoever. I'm just.
Yeah, it's weird.
And then I think, what do you care, Nate? It's 23-19, and at the end, I'm like, man, I hope they missed this 2-point conversion.
Well, yeah, while you're watching it, it's like it's different. Like, so I saw the score. So I had to watch the game after it played, so I watched it after the fact. So I knew the score. Because when I clicked on it, the score was visible to replay the game. But it didn't matter because it was preseason, right? I actually cared more about not looking at Twitter throughout the day so that I wouldn't know anybody else's thoughts or opinions on anything before I saw it. You know what I mean? So I wouldn't, have an unbiased look going into it.
Yeah. John, you're a consummate pro, man. Yeah, you wouldn't be like, yeah. Somebody's like, Kyle Allen sucks. You're like, yeah, he does suck. Well, let me see how much he sucks, or whatever. It's a little far, but yeah, I totally know what you mean. That's why I don't listen to like WGR and some of those stations, or like even sometimes the local stations, because I don't want it to, change my opinion on this podcast. Like I want to have original thoughts, and I do listen to a lot of different podcasts, so I can't say I don't listen to anything, but I try to avoid it so that I can give some sort of original take, and then listen to them after and be like, oh, did they agree with me or not? So let's go into, so that was the Buffalo Bills 23-19 preseason opener win against the Colts in Orchard Park. Now let's go into an interesting topic from the AP, where the Buffalo Bills' new stadium cost overruns approaching $300 million, AP sources say. Orchard Park, New York. 3 months since construction began on their new stadium, the Buffalo Bills are already facing a potential cash crunch, with the latest projections having the team on the hook for as much as $300 million in cost overruns. For what was initially estimated to cost $1.4 billion in March of 2022, an increase to $1.54 billion months later, is now projected to have jumped to $1.65 billion and approaching $1.7 billion. The people told AP, because of anonymity, because nobody ever wants to put their name to anything, which I don't blame them. The rising price tag is notable because the Bills are contractually required to cover any overruns beyond the then agreed to cost of $1.4 billion as part of the tentative deal the team reached with the state and Erie County 16 months ago. Increased labor and material costs were cited for the increased price, with one person saying one line item had already come in at $75 million over budget. Whew. Another person saying a delay in sending out bids also had an effect in upping the cost. The Athletic first reported on the cost overruns last weekend and cited unidentified individuals as projecting the stadium's price tag potentially reaching $1.9 billion, so $500 million over the estimated cost. Newly appointed Bills COO John Roth called the projections premature and speculative at best. We don't know enough yet to confirm this. We'll just look at the bids. look at the cost estimates, John Roth. Just have someone do some research. You're like, we don't know enough yet. Roth that's such a weird answer, because he could have easily said it's not true, or I'm not sure, let me check, and then got back, let me get back to you in a day. Let me ask those guys. How do you not know? You're the chief operating officer. Roth took over 3 weeks ago after Ron Racua was fired. Racua was involved in stadium negotiations and took on an even larger role over the final year after co-owner Kim Pegulas suffered a debilitating heart attack in June 2022. A ballooning price tag would place a larger than expected burden on the Bills, who were initially committed to covering $550 million of the construction costs. Their share now stands to potentially match the taxpayer contribution of $850 million. The Bills agreed to cover the cost overruns in exchange for having full control over the stadium's design and construction. One of the people told the AP before negotiations began that overruns were expected based on the Bills' projected cost of $1.4 billion. The Bills had initially pegged the cost of the stadium at about $1.5 billion before switching design firms. The Bills are funding the loan through the NFL's G4 loan program. The rest of the money is being raised through a first-time seating licensing fee for season ticket holders. It's unclear how the Bills will make up the difference and what cost-cutting measures they can make to the design of a 60,000 plus seat facility being built across from their current home. That's what that pisses me off, right? Like I read that and I say, like, what kind of cost cutting measures can they have? So like, how can they make it cheaper for like us? Because they're not, cost cutting any of the suites or anything like that. But for like Joe Blow, like us, right? Like they're gonna, we were gonna have these nice padded seats, and now they're gonna be bleacher seats. Those metal crappy bleacher seats. Like that's what's gonna happen now. Just so you know, we were gonna give a cup holder to every seat. Now we're gonna give it to every other seat. Stuff like that. Pegula has a projected net worth of $6.7 billion and made his fortune through the natural gas industry by discovering and then selling off the drilling rights of tracks to gas-rich fields across the country. Blah, blah, blah. So, thoughts, John and Mike, when you hear that and you read that the Bills are going to have overages, like what are your thoughts on that it's going to, like, it's funny, Tailgate Beers, which is one of my favorite accounts on Twitter, Instagram, whatever. Tailgate Beers had a funny meme of like Pegula on Bernie Sanders' head. He's like, I am now asking you for a donation to the cause or whatever. Like Pegula coming to us. Like I can't imagine him doing that, but I would not put it past him to like somehow negotiate more money. You know what I mean?
I'm curious how often this happens with new stadium builds.
Like going that, like, and then what happens like, after that, right? Like, do they go back to the city and county?
Is it like assumed that there's always going to be overages, or like how often does it happen?
Let's see. Hold on, I'm gonna look at that really quick. The Los Angeles stadium in LA was $2.5 billion over budget. Apparently, that's that's a little bit more. How do you overshoot? How do you overshoot the estimate by $2.5 billion?
They probably do it on purpose, just so they can get the initial deal done. It's like, well, it's too late now, so we have to figure it out.
Well, then they hold the city hostage, or the county or state hostage again. They're like, well, we're not going to cover all this. Like, we can't be expected to pay as much as you guys are. I thought that was interesting. I don't have any. Is it sad? Like, I don't have any sympathy whatsoever for this. Like it would, like what's the equivalent of that for like people like us if we had our own business, right? Like if we had our own business, we're like, I don't know, I made stadium seats, like something like that, and I held the state hostage. It's just like we're gonna need a new facility to make some stadium seats, right? Like to manufacture it, to pack them, to design them, to build them. Like we need the state to cover half the amount of the facility. Like that would be the equivalent of it, right? Which never happens for us. Like if it was just someone like me or you, the state would be like, we'll give you some rebates, but we're not covering half the cost of it. So like, should I feel, I don't know. Mike, what do you think about that? You're the money guy. You feel bad for this? It's the cost of doing business, man.
I don't think anybody's surprised about the overage. I think it's just a matter of course, kind of as John alluded to. But I think it's not like Pegula is going to pay it, right? It's just going to increase the prices for everything.
Yeah.
It doesn't impact him at all.
Yeah, he's just going to make those PSLs cost even more, right? I think it's going to be like $800 minimum for a PSL. So, like, let's say he was expected to pay that. Let's see. Let me do the math real quick. 60,000 seats. He was going to have to front $550 million.
That's not enough seats.
50. He's got to add more. He should be adding more, but then construction costs will go up, so they can make more seats. 500. That's an average cost of $9,200 per seat for PSLs. If you were to just take the PSL fees and pay for each seat, would be roughly $9,200. I know it's not like that. There's probably going to be like $800 or $1,000 ones, and then there'll be some that are like $30,000, I'm sure. But so then if you want it, so like, okay, so now all of a sudden you're talking about, let's say so now it's $850 million. All of a sudden it went from $9,200 per seat for a PSL to $14,200 for PSL. So that's $5,000 more per average PSL just to cover this cost. Who's going to pay that? Which one of us would, like, we talked about getting season tickets. If somebody was like, here, you can get, you're talking about, what is it, $5,000 increase.
If I won the lottery.
A 50% increase. What's that if you won the lottery? 52% increase in cost for PSLs. So all of a sudden that $1,000 thing, it became $1,500, which may not be, I don't know. Anyway, I thought that was interesting. Leave it at that. So, guys, just once again, this episode is brought to you by the Twin Spire Sportsbook at Delago, at the Delago Resort and Casino, where every moment is a winning moment. Is there anything else?
I maintain that they should be doing background checks on people going in, doing construction, because that cost is going to double if they if some Pats fan gets on the construction crew and plays the long game and buries a Brady jersey at the 50-yard line. That's my continued worry.
They should have video cameras surveilling that site even now, even like 24/7. Like there should be barbed wire, 20-foot barbed wire fences. You know, like they show it in like prisons where they have like multiple levels of barbed wire fence in case like somebody actually gets out of one and there's like another one that they have to like, man, so they have to scale like 2 or 3 of them to get out. They should do that around the Bills Stadium site just to stop a potential Pats fan from doing that. Even construction worker or, just surveil that thing, right? John, anything else you want to add to the game, about the game, things that we didn't cover? By the way, I didn't mention this earlier. Maybe wall of shame. I don't know if it's fair for it, but like Terrell Bernard, I know he's injured. I know it's a hamstring injury. It's not his fault. But like if you think about trending down, like it's Tyrell Dodson's job right now. He's basically going into the season, especially if Bernard isn't going to be out there for another week at least. Like it's Tyrell Dodson's job at this point. Because your greatest ability is your availability. And unfortunately, this would have been a perfect game. That's the only reason I gave him the wall of shame, is because this would have been a perfect game for him to show that if he was in live game action better than Tyrell Dodson, this was the game to do it. So now he might not even get that chance. And he might be the better player at middle linebacker, but the coaching staff will be forced to use Tyrell Dodson just because. And I don't think he looked bad. I don't think he looked great, but that was my last thought. John?
No,
else?
I think I'm good.
So thank you guys all for listening. As always, we'll be on again next week, talk about that game. So signing off for John.
Go Bills, and congratulations to Jessica Pegula, who won the National Bank Open for her 3rd career WTA Tour victory.
Congrats to Jessica. Mike?
Go Bills.
And for me, Nate, go Bills. Good win. Let's hope the next time we talk to you, they're 2-0.
Thank you for listening to the Circling the Wagons podcast. Download and subscribe to us in your favorite podcast service. Email us at ctwpod@gmail.com. That's Charlie Tango Whiskey Pod @gmail.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter at CTWPod. And most importantly, go Bills!
Nobody circles the wagons like the Buffalo Bills.
Nobody circles the wagons like the Buffalo Bills, Nate.
John is such a homer for rich people.
What did I say?
You think it's like AI, where like you have to be like, "Oh, hello AI, thank you for your help today, AI." So when the robots take over, they're not going to murder you. Like that, I can get on board with. You sucking up
AI.
Pegulas, less inclined to tolerate.
It's artificial intelligence, John. That's what it states.
Thanks. I have
AI.
non-artificial
Whoa.
intelligence over here, so
Suck it up to simping on the AI. That would sounds like a good Reddit thread, doesn't it? They do not care about you whatsoever. They're just like,
I'll simp to AI. Like, it's a whole class. John's simping to one human.
One human that doesn't know that.
It won't know he exists.